Hello all and welcome to our video on the Age of Exploration, subtitled Gold, God, Gold, and Glory. So today we're going to talk about the Age of Exploration, what it was, what it meant, and what it means for us right now. So there are a number of factors that help to lead to this Age of Exploration, and I distinguish the Age of Exploration from the Age of Discovery in that I consider the Age of Discovery everything between the Renaissance and the Scientific Revolution, ending right at the end of the Scientific Revolution. Because this really is a time of discovery. And they're not just discovering new places, it's new ideas and new forms of art and things like that. They're discovering things. Exploration means to me that they're actually going and exploring new places. So yeah, I do consider it a different thing than the Age of Discovery. So the Age of Exploration, how did we get to trying to go around the earth on a sailboat? So basically it again starts with Crusades and links directly in with the Renaissance, which is why this is part of the same unit. So with the Crusades, as we know, the Europeans learned a lot about the riches, the goods in other parts of the world, particularly in the Muslim East. They discovered new goods, they wanted those new goods, and they discovered new ways of getting those goods with new types of information that came from the Muslim scholars, as you recall. The second thing is the Renaissance. The Renaissance, as we know, led to a new age of people willing to explore, willing to be creative and look at new things. So learning, new invention, innovation, it became important to more people during the Renaissance, and that allowed for this age of exploration to happen. Third, the Reformation. The Reformation was a very tense time, as we know. There was a lot of tension between different religious factions, and it made people want to look somewhere else to establish their religion and to be free to practice their religion without fear of being persecuted. So people wanted like different land. They wanted to move, basically. Fourth, there was a competing aspect to this. The countries at this time were getting kind of territorial. They were trying to start to compete for power. They wanted to look wealthy. They wanted to be powerful. They wanted to control things. And so having more land equals having more money, and more money is having more power, as we know from everything we've ever learned in life. If you have money, you have power. So right, having land is a good thing. And so this finding land means that, you're more powerful. Finally, trade. And this is maybe the biggest one, but it comes out of everything else. It comes out of the Crusades, as we know, and it comes out of the Renaissance and the Reformation and the competing nations. Trade is expanding. People are getting new goods. They are interested in new types of goods. They want difference in their food and in their spices and in their clothes. And they're trying to look for better, faster trading routes so that they can get those goods from wherever they're coming from and bring them back to Western Europe very quickly. So these are the 5 primary factors that helped to lead to the Age of Exploration: the Crusades, the Renaissance, the Reformation, competition, and trade. There were a couple of motivations that sort of pushed people to want to explore, and these boiled down to gold, God, and glory, as per my subtitle of this video. So first, gold. Italians and Muslims dominated trade at this time. As we know, trading ports came in and out of Italy, and they came from the Muslim East, and they were Muslim goods. And we know that that this is where the trade really happened between the Muslims and the Italians, and they totally dominated trade. So everything that came into Western Europe came from Italy, basically. Western Europeans wanted greater control over this. They were like, we need to cut out the middleman. I need something. I need this stuff faster. I don't want to keep paying them extra money for these goods that I could be getting myself for cheaper. So, gold. Second, Europeans wanted to spread Christianity. They wanted to convert all non-Christians. This is part of this religious fervor that's kind of coming out of, the bubonic plague first, and the Reformation second. They also wanted to set up churches for future settlement. So if they can Christianize the area, it's easier to settle later. So it was a very good method of creating sneaky colonies. Think about that, sneaky colonies. This boils down to God, although honestly it also boils down to gold. Third, glory. They were interested in innovation and invention and exploration, and these people just wanted to discover something new. They wanted their names in history books, and the people who did it well, their names are in history books. I'm going to talk about a couple of them even. So like we do know them. They wanted that glory. They wanted to be remembered. They wanted to discover something. So these are the three primary motivations, and like I said, they all boil down to gold, God, and glory. And pretty much everything comes back to those three when you're looking at the Age of Exploration. There's different technologies that allowed for the Age of Exploration to happen, and most of it came from the East. And it came from Muslim scholars. As we know, the astrolabe was created by Muslim scholars. The magnetic compass was created in China, and we know about this. So check out this list. These were the primary things that were introduced to Western Europe that allowed them to take over. The caravel, if you'll notice the fifth one down, is a Portuguese ship. The Portuguese did create this ship. It was very fast, and it could navigate the ocean even if the winds were against you. So caravel was a huge invention that really allowed for this to happen, which allowed for the Portuguese to really sort of get a jump on everyone else and start exploring and colonizing early. So one of the main things that they wanted to do as explorers was to find a quicker way into the East. As we know, they wanted to cut out the middleman in Italy and go straight to the East themselves. But they didn't want to cross all that land because it takes forever to walk across that land. You can spend your whole life doing it, even on a horse or a camel or whatever you're riding. So sailing is much, much faster. Especially when the winds are good. So they thought, hey, let's try to sail around. So they did. So they sailed around Africa here. See this blue line that goes all the way around the tip of Africa and into India. This was the goal. This was what they intended to do, and they did it. They also did it a couple of other ways when they were coming through the seas. They would cut through these little oceans and seas and then take a little bit of land and then go back into the Mediterranean, etc. So they were sort of doing a mix of land routes and sea routes, but the sea routes were much, much faster. So going around Africa was a huge one. And this is what the Portuguese did. They could do it very, very quickly. The Portuguese navigation started with Prince Henry, who we now call Prince Henry the Navigator. He was the first to bring slaves from Africa, particularly Angola, into Europe, and this started in 1441. The whole point for Henry to go into exploration was that he wanted to find the source of African gold. He wanted to get involved in slaving, hence the bringing the slaves to Europe, And he wanted to start a crusade with the Muslims in northern Africa, because the Muslims in northern Africa would sometimes come to Portugal and live there, and people are racist and didn't like that. So basically he wanted to start a crusade. So this was his whole thing. He did end up bringing the slaves from Africa. He also established a school of navigation because he was really a good navigator. I mean, he wasn't a great person, considering that he, like, started basically slaving and allowed for the slave trade to happen. But it still he was still a really good navigator. So he set up a school for navigation. Because of his navigating, the Portuguese ended up gaining control of the West African slave trade. They were the first to round the tip of southern Africa. They established the Cape of Good Hope, which is now Cape Town in modern-day South Africa. And Vasco da Gama followed Prince Henry the Navigator and was the first to sail around Africa and then all the way to India. So he didn't just sail around the southern tip of Africa. He sailed into the east, and that started the Portuguese Empire sort of taking over the east. So the Spanish were kind of the second on the scene. Christopher Columbus was a big one. I'm sure you guys know things about Christopher Columbus. We can talk about it more in class if you'd like to. But basically, he was given those 3 ships that we all know from Isabella and Ferdinand of Spain. He was contracted to go and find a new way to get to the east. He believed he could sail west and get to the east. So, which I guess, like, if you're, I don't know, if you go far enough, you're back in the east, or if you consider, I don't know. But if he sailed west, he could reach the east. He had this really great theory. However, he had no idea how big the earth was. He totally underestimated the circumference. He was on the seas for months. A whole bunch of his people died. They were starving. And then they hit the Americas, which they had no knowledge of. They were idiots and thought that they had reached India. They hadn't. But here we are, living in America now. This led to first the Spanish conquest of the Americas, which I'm sure you probably know something about, but we'll talk about it more. The conquistadors were the people who came from Spain to conquer primarily Central and Southern America, South America and Central America, as well as Mexico. So this is how, why Mexicans speak Spanish, because of the conquistadors that came in and settled there. So the conquistadors' motto literally was God, glory, and gold. See, we're always coming back to this theme during the Age of Exploration of this Christianity, trying to make yourself a hero and trying to make yourself rich all at the same time. And that's really the theme here, and it's the official one for the conquistadors. The Spanish also, in their conquest of the Americas, led to the Great Dying, which was a time of extraordinary death in the Americas due to smallpox, basically, and other diseases that came over from the European countries. We're going to talk about this a little bit more in class, but just remember that the Great Dying happened in the Americas, and it happened as a result of primarily disease. Finally, the Spanish started the Columbian Exchange and, in effect, the transatlantic slave trade. The Columbian Exchange is basically just a transfer of people and products and ideas and things between North America, South America, and Europe. So basically the Western Hemisphere and the Eastern Hemisphere. So from Europe came, Europe and Africa came like bananas and cows and chicken and coffee and rice and things like that, and wheat. And they came to North America. And from North America came beans and chocolate and potatoes and things like that. that you even think about as being like traditionally European potatoes. Potatoes came from North America, so they went to Europe. So there's this big transfer of people and products and ideas. These, what we're looking at right now, are primarily foodstuffs, but let's also look at this list. There are foodstuffs, that's huge, but there's also metals that are being moved. So gold and silver, particularly from Southern or South America and Central America, as well as tobacco coming from the New World. The Old World is bringing the like livestock, so horses and cows, things that are actually living, as well as diseases such as smallpox and measles and influenza and typhus, which is, like I said, totally wiped out a large number of the indigenous people that were in the Americas before the Europeans were in the Americas. The Columbian Exchange also leads to the transfer of human slaves from Africa to the New World and into Europe. So slaves come from Africa, which is part of that Eastern Hemisphere, and are transported into the Americas. So that's another thing to keep in mind. People such as slaves are being forced to move. People from Europe are choosing to move, and with everyone is coming new ideas and new cultures. So this is a very brief introduction into the age of exploration. We're going to talk about this a whole lot more in class. If you have questions, please let me know. I will see you guys soon. Thanks.